Well, hello there, everyone. The weekend is just about over, and it's time for another episode of Record Collecting with the Quill. The theme for today, well, the other day I saw some posts on Facebook. I believe that it was a year ago since we lost the great producer and engineer, mixing engineer, Martin Birch. And I started thinking, well, there's a guy who did it all, I guess. Recorded tons of great albums through his career. So that will be the subject for today. We will discuss some of my favorite Martin Birch albums. So stay tuned. Before we start, you know the drill. Make sure you subscribe and also share with your friends. Well, Martin Birch, before we start discussing the albums he did in his career, what kind of a producer was he? Well, when you look at his body of work, you can see he worked with a lot of great guitarists: Richie Blackmore, Michael Schenker, Tony Iommi, who worked with Blue Oyster Cult and also Iron Maiden for a long period of time. And when you listen to his records, and I listened to quite a few of them lately just for this episode, you tend to notice that his recordings always have quite prominent guitars and also quite prominent drums as well. And as a bass player, well, I like to have a heavy bass on albums, but it's something when you look at all his albums, they are rarely bass heavy. He's more of a mid-range guy, and you also notice that often he tends to have the artist record longer songs as well, with a couple of exceptions that I will get into, but they always have a couple of really long songs on every album, and some of the bands that we will discuss will always have long songs, but I think in a few cases, I think that's maybe something he added to the production of some of those albums. Well, starting out, he did a tons of stuff, and he started out in the late 60s actually, and started out as an engineer and then worked his way up as a producer and mixing engineer as well. But the first really big album, he started out doing a couple of albums with Fleetwood Mac. There was some great stuff there, but the first really big album, and where I guess he sort of earned his stripes, is of course this one, Deep Purple in Rock, and one of my favorite albums as well, where he helped Deep Purple develop a new sound and found that heavier sound they were looking for. And this is an absolute classic. If you don't own it, you have to get it. It's a fantastic must-have album. This is a nice fold-out Japanese pressing. It's a reissue, I believe, but nonetheless cool. You have some of the greatest track in hard rock and heavy metal here ever. You have Shine in Time, you have Speed King, Into the Fire, the list goes on. And I think he is really a big part of helping Deep Purple develop the sound. He produced all of the rest of their albums, or worked with them as an engineer for the 70s. So this one is a must-have if you're into Martin Birch. The next one he didn't produce, but it's an album I'm quite fond of anyway. This one he only worked as an engineer, but it's this one, Wishbone Ash, and the album is called August. This is a little bit more mellow. It's not your typical hard rock album, even though it looks kind of sinister looking at the cover. Wishbone Ash is a band I don't know their career at all, but this album is one that always pops up when you're talking about great albums from the 70s, and I quite enjoy this. There's some cool harmony guitars on this one. Otherwise, it's quite mellow, but he worked this one as an engineer, and yeah, it's a cool listen. If you're into Black Sabbath, you may not like it, but if you're into the mellower stuff, this is something for you. After I said he worked with Deep Purple for all of the 70s, but when Deep Purple disbanded, he turned to this group and worked with Rainbow for quite a few albums. And what can you say about Rainbow Rising that hasn't been said? Once again, this is really guitar heavy, it's drum heavy. You have Cozy Powell on drums, you have some absolute stunning tracks here, Tarot Woman, you have Stargazer, and so on. Absolute must have. It's one of the, I mean, greatest hard rock albums from the 70s. The first one is really good as well, but for some reason I dig this a bit more, probably because of Cozy Powell. Next one is one I know that both the band and Martin himself wasn't too pleased with. Is Black Sabbath, Mob Rules. There seemed to be a consensus between Martin and Black Sabbath that Heaven and Hell is the better album, but I actually prefer this one. I think there are some absolutely standout tracks on this one, whereas I think Heaven and Hell has a couple of, I mean, super great songs. Heaven and Hell, you have Neon Nights and Children of the Sea, but you also have a couple of fillers. Whereas I think this one is fantastic from the beginning to the end. I know I read some interview with Tony and I believe Martin as well, and they were having some serious drug problems doing this one, but nonetheless it's a fantastic album, and Vinny Appice is doing a fantastic job as a drummer here as well. His drumming is quite unique and makes this album really shine as well. I love, Falling Off the Edge of the World, Voodoo, Mob Rules, Turn Up the Night. For heaven's sakes, we should end the episode and just listen to this album right away. Next one is done around the same time. Blue Oyster Cult, Fire of Unknown Origin. Blue Oyster Cult and Black Sabbath toured around this time. They were managed by the same management, and they also worked with the same producer. And he did 2 albums with Black Sabbath, Heaven and Hell and Mob Rules, and he did 2 albums with Blue Oyster Cult. He did Cultosaurus Erectus before this one, the second one. I think this one is slightly better as well, even though the first album had some really strong tracks as well, thinking mainly of Black Blade. But this one, really sinister cover, once again, not totally unlike the Mob Rules, whereas this one is a lot more radio friendly, I guess. The big hit being Burning For You. Absolutely love that track by Blue Oyster Cult, but there's some other great tracks as well here. And he did great work, but once again, not in any way heavy, but guitar oriented and a lot of also drum oriented as well. You can hear a lot of, as I said, mid-range recordings. Then he turned to another guitarist for another one of those guitar hero type of guys, and he only did 1 album with Shanky Group, the Ill-Fated Assault Attack, the one he did with Graham Bonnet, who previously sang on one record with Rainbow. And this one was a lot of arguing in the band because Michael Schenker wanted Graham Bonnet, and Cozy Powell wanted someone else. I think David Coverdale was his choice. It ended up, the band was named Michael Shanky Group, so Michael Schenker got his way, and Graham Bonnet was in the band and Cozy was out. But this lineup only survived for, I believe it was 1 single show where Graham was really drunk and appeared nude on stage to some degree and was booted out of the band. But it's a great album nonetheless. There's some standout tracks here that I absolutely love. Samurai is really cool one, the Desert Song, and the first one, Assault Attack as well. So it's well worth a listen if you haven't heard it. Then of course he did a bunch of albums with Whitesnake, and I chose this one. This is my favorite, Slide It In. I love the previous ones as well, but here is an example where the songs aren't that long, but I think that is mainly due to David Coverdale want starting to go in a more radio-friendly American direction. And in the end, it turned out that this album was released in 2 different versions. You have the UK version, which I prefer, that Martin mixed, and then you have the US version where they did a little of extra recording, and they added John Sykes to it, and Neil Murray did some additional bass as well. I'm not too fond of that. I prefer this one, the UK mix, where Martin, this has to be one of the greatest drum sounds ever on this album. It's absolutely fantastic. A lot of space in the drums, you can hear them really well, and a lot of guitars. And once again, the bass takes a little bit of a backseat. Still there, but it's in no way near really present in the mix. But an absolute fantastic album. This is a really nice Japanese copy, by the way. And last, you have to mention, you can't talk about Martin Birch without talking about Iron Maiden. He worked with them, he started working with them on the Killers album, and then worked with them exclusively until he retired after the Fear of the Dark album in the early 90s. This is the one, if you're talking Iron Maiden albums, you have Number of the Beast, you have Hallowed Be Thy Name, you have Children of the Damned, The Prisoner, 22 Acacia Avenue. The work he did with Iron Maiden, he was really a major key ingredient in having them taking the next step, very much as he did with Deep Purple in the early 70s. He helped Iron Maiden develop their own sound. Absolutely love this album, but he did tons of great stuff with Iron Maiden. I think only the last few were kind of a little bit, but I think that was mainly because the band was kind of out of focus, I think, there with Bruce leaving shortly afterwards. But this one is a must-have as well. Number of the Beast, Iron Maiden, the last pick of the Martin Birch greatest albums. So that was my pick. My picks, I don't know. I'm not English. I'm just doing the best I can. What albums do you prefer with Martin Birch? As I said, if you look at his resume, he did an amazing bunch of albums through his career. What are your choices? I want to hear. Please write in the comment section. What are your favorite Martin Birch albums? And also, make sure to follow us on social media with the Quill. It's the Quill Sweden. We have a brand new video out now called Left Brain Blues. We're superheroes, cartoon superheroes. That's kind of interesting to become a cartoon superhero when you're 48 years old. But it was cool. It's a little bit tongue-in-cheek and a little bit of a tip of the hat to those old 70s superhero cartoons you watched as a kid. I think it turned out quite cool, actually. So check it out. I think there will be a link appearing somewhere so you can watch the video. Well, anyway, that's it for this week. See you all again next Sunday with a new subject. Cheers to you all. Bye.